It's Tuesday, May 26, 2026. Trump says we may be close to a deal with Iran for the 50th time. Thomas Massie not finishing well, and I'm coming out of the closet. Not like that. Next on the AM Update. Well, after a Memorial Day weekend full of rumors, full of reports, full of leaks from various media outlets, especially from the Middle East, President Trump on Memorial Day morning posted on Truth Social a lengthy wall of text. I'm not going to read the entire thing for you. Here are some of the bullet points. He still says it's all or nothing when it comes to Iran and nuclear in their ability to develop a nuclear weapon. He says talks with Iran are proceeding well, but insists on a great deal or no deal at all. He says he had a meeting on Saturday with 10 regional leaders, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, all to coordinate the Iran deal and Accords expansion. Yes, and Abraham Accords expansion. Trump is calling for all listed countries to simultaneously sign the Abraham Accords as a condition of any Iran settlement. Saudi Arabia and Qatar must sign first. Refusal signals bad intention and exclusion from the deal. As you might already know, these are the countries that are already in the Abraham Accords, which are basically opening up formal diplomatic relationships with the nation of Israel. United Arab Emirates, they are a member of the Abraham Accords. Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, Kazakhstan, those are all members of the Abraham Accords. Now, Trump is saying Saudi Arabia and Qatar must sign on first, followed by Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan. He also extended the invitation to Iran themselves. He's framing the accords as financial, economic, and social booms for the involved countries. None have considered leaving thus far. Trump formally directed his representatives to start the process of bringing listed countries into the Abraham Accords, framing the potential agreement as the most important deal in Middle Eastern history, bringing peace for the first time in 5,000 years. So that's the gist of that wall of text that President Trump unleashed on Monday morning on Truth Social, inviting all of these Middle Eastern countries together to open up formal relationships with Israel. So that seems like a long shot, basically putting the onus on Saudi Arabia. Now, we did have some stories. I'm not sure about the veracity of this, so take this with a grain of salt. We did have some stories come out that in very clandestine operations, the United Arab Emirates and I think even Saudi Arabia actually did join in the barrage against Iran when fighting was actually ongoing. I'm not sure. That kind of sounds like Middle Eastern oppo, so they could say, hey, we were actually doing our part as well. I'm not sure if that's actually true. I'm very skeptical about the outcome of this potential foray, inviting Qatar, inviting Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords. Skeptical because for the most part, it seems like they really didn't pull their end of the deal. They didn't really pull any weight when it came to the operation against Iran, even though I think it's been very clear on the background that they were very supportive of regime change, or at least a very much diminished Iran. So I would just really encourage you, I'm not trying to be condescending, really encourage you. There's going to be a lot of takes if you're on social media flying around about what this deal actually entails, what this deal doesn't entail. I read you some of the top lines from President Trump's own words on Truth Social. You can make up your own mind about what you think about this and any other matter for that matter. Just urge caution if you see reports about what this potential deal does and does not contain, because the information war was at a fever pitch over the weekend as well, trying to frame this as some sort of total capitulation from the U.S., trying to frame this as some sort of total victory for Iran and vice versa. I'm not really sure what to make of that. And I don't think anybody is right now because we don't have access to all of that information. Here is something that I can confirm, though. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian, he was on television, Iran state television. Here's what he said. Here is a translation. We are ready to reassure the world we are not seeking nuclear weapons. We are not seeking instability in the region. It is Israel that is the destabilizer in the region. Now, that last sentence aside, that's pretty much any day that ends in Y in Iran, blaming Israel for everything. I think it is notable after all of this posturing from Iran, even in the midst of the destruction of their military, even all of this posturing, they've never really said anything like that. And that's Masoud Pezeshkian. And yes, that is the civil government, the president of the civil government, not the IRGC. But he's willing to say now, yeah, we don't want nuclear weapons. We're willing to say that all over again. On the topic of those who say that the deal that the United States is pursuing is a total capitulation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that couldn't be further from the truth.
No one who has been stronger on this issue than President Trump. Multiple political leaders, multiple presidents of the United States have all said the same thing. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The only one who's tried to do anything and has actually done anything about it in a real way has been President Trump. So his commitment to that principle that they'll never have a nuclear weapon shouldn't be questioned by anybody. And the idea that somehow this president, given everything he's already proven he's willing to do, is going to somehow agree to a deal that ultimately winds up putting Iran in a stronger position when it comes to nuclear ambitions is absurd. That's just not going to happen. But our preference is to address this through a diplomatic means. And that's what we're endeavoring to do here. I think we've made some progress. I'm always cautious when I say that because you can agree to things on paper, they actually have to be implemented.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying it's just preposterous, absurd that the United States would cut a deal that would ensure Iran is in a stronger or as strong of a position as they were before the start of the war. So here's the bottom line in my mind. I think it's absolutely true. President Trump is not going to allow that to happen, not going to allow Iran to have some sort of better positioning in the Middle East, in that region, than they came into the war with. I think it's also true that Iran is not going to capitulate to the degree that Washington would like them to. So something in the middle there that's probably going to make both sides upset. That's probably what's going to come to fruition, if anything comes to fruition at all. Back at the White House, here is Selena Wang taping a stand-up live shot for ABC News at the White House on Saturday afternoon.
That President Trump has said a deal is close, only for the two sides to remain far apart.
There's that ABC News reporter taping a live stand-up hit at the White House. In the midst of a shooting, the Secret Service fatally shot a person who opened fire at officers at a security checkpoint Saturday in an exchange of gunfire that briefly locked down the White House. The shooting happened shortly after 6 p.m. local time when a male approached the Secret Service checkpoint at 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, pulled a gun from a bag, and opened fire on officers. Officers returned fire, shot at the suspect, who was taken to a hospital where he later died. The suspect was identified as 21-year-old Nazir Best of Dundalk, Maryland. That's according to the Metro Police Department. Bystander was also shot by the Secret Service. We think by the Secret Service. The victim, who was a man, sustained a non-life-threatening gunshot wound, was still recovering at the hospital on Monday. So yet another Secret Service-involved shooting in Washington, D.C. Just incredible. Just incredible. Not much is known. I haven't seen any reporting about this latest would-be shooter who is now dead. Haven't seen anything about motives, nothing like that so far. But it just seems like every other week we've gotten a story just like this. Congressman Thomas Massie, fresh off of his primary loss in Kentucky's 4th Congressional District to Trump-endorsed and backed Ed Gallerine, well, he went on Meet the Press on NBC, did some of the media rounds over the weekend, and says he's got this big old promise to make. Listen to this. I'm not sure why he didn't do this by now.
Can we expect you to name more names in the coming weeks and months?
Yes. Todd Blanche is violating the law. There's still millions of files they haven't released. We know from talking to the victims' lawyers that their own 302 forms haven't been released. We know that files have been over-redacted. I have released at least 3 names of billionaires who are implicated in this. I don't think it's possible to get to convictions with Todd Blanche at the top and with the FBI director, Kash Patel, at the top, because they've effectively both perjured themselves by saying that there's nobody else in the files. Even Melania doesn't believe that. The First Lady knows that Jeffrey Epstein didn't act alone. And here's the great thing, Kristen. Whether I'm in Congress or not, the Epstein Files Transparency Act is a law, and it goes on for years. So if we can't get this Attorney General and this FBI director to do the right thing, the next ones who take those seats are obligated by law to release the files that these individuals are not releasing now.
Thomas Massie, Congressman, on his way out of Washington, exiting stage left or right, whichever one it is, after taking a pot shot at his opponent who beat him implicating that he's like bought and paid for by Israel or something. That was his concession speech the other night. Now says he's going to read the entire list of names on the Epstein client list before his time in Congress is at an end. Again, do you recall Thomas Massie beating the drum since 2019 about Jeffrey Epstein? Do you remember that? It's been relatively recent, like within the last year, that he's been at the forefront of this. He had all of this time when he was still in the run-up to his election. He could have read the names of the Epstein client list at any point. Now he's waiting till this point. Not finishing well. When we come back, maybe another hole in the legal theory protecting trans. And I'm coming out of the closet on AI just a little bit, dipping a toe out of the closet. That's coming up next. A woman who had her breasts removed after identifying as non-binary has reached a confidential settlement after suing her mental health providers reportedly for $3.5 million. Camille Kiefel, 36 years old, filed a malpractice lawsuit against 2 organ therapists whom she alleges inappropriately approved her for surgery after brief telemedicine sessions despite her history of mental health diagnoses that included trauma, depression, suicidal ideation, and ADHD. Kiefel underwent double mastectomy in August of 2020 based on 2 referral letters for surgery from Amy Ruff, a licensed clinical social worker, and Mara Burmeister, a licensed professional counselor. The complaint filed in 2022 also names their respective employers, Brave Space and the Quest Center for Integrative Health. The complaint alleged Kiefel was approved for surgery after 2 Zoom sessions, each lasting approximately an hour or less. However, she says the surgery did not solve her gender distress and she detransitioned less than 2 years later. She said the surgery left her with lasting physical health complications and emotional and psychological harm. Her complaint springs claims of professional malpractice, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. Days before her case was set to go to trial, Kiefel reached a confidential settlement with the defendants, according to reporter Benjamin Ryan, who first covered the case. Kiefel told Fox News she wanted to hold her health providers accountable to protect other women from going through the same experience. She said, quote, "I didn't want what happened to me to go to other vulnerable girls and women. And I wasn't given true informed consent, and that's something everyone deserves to have for any medical procedure." So the latest in a string of lawsuits being settled now, or going through trial, that was kind of the news earlier this year, involving meatball surgery in the name of gender. Praise the Lord. What this does not do is change the recommendation from the various academies that write recommendations for so-called gender medicine. I'm using scare quotes for those of you listening. What that doesn't do is change all of the recommendations from all of the various academic groups. What this does do is make insurance a little bit more expensive, a lot bit more expensive for these so-called social workers, mental health professionals. If they engage in telling women, young women, to chop their boobs off in the name of gender, because that's going to make them feel whole, chopping off parts of their body. Yeah, that's going to make you feel whole. That's going to make them feel a little bit more, let's just say, reticent about doing that in the future, especially if they have to pay more for malpractice insurance. So maybe another hole in the dam of the legal theories propping up so-called transgenderism. I want to read this for you in passing. Vox is still around. If you haven't heard that, Vox.com. It's an online publication, digital publication, very, very left-wing. They published one of their writers named Bryan Walsh, who writes on climate and other related topics. He wrote this editorial the other day called "Climate Change's Worst Case Scenario is Officially Canceled." Bryan Walsh, he's a veteran reporter on the climate space, writing for Vox, in part, quote, "The numbers shaped a decade. Those numbers shaped a decade and a half of climate journalism." Now, what numbers is he talking about? He's talking about RCP 8.5. I'm just going to boil this down to you as much as I possibly can. There are a number of models that scientists use to try to predict different futures of the planet different climates, different weather patterns, climate patterns, what have you. There's different computer models that they use. RCP 8.5 has been one of the most dire forecasts about what could happen if human beings actually cause climate change, global warming, the term du jour for whatever decade we're living in. There have been some changes to RCP 8.5 that make it seem, well, let's just say, not quite so dire anymore. And it's being challenged quite a bit by the scientific community. Here's what this means. So this writer, Bryan Walsh, senior editorial director at Vox overseeing the climate teams, said this. Those numbers, RCP 8.5, shaped a decade and a half of climate journalism, including a lot of my own, when I covered climate change at Time magazine. I didn't always know, and I didn't always communicate that the scenario behind the most apocalyptic, attention-getting findings was largely an attempt to imagine how bad things could get, not a true forecast. But I wasn't alone. RCP 8.5 was a frequent background presence in climate journalism. What this is saying, to boil this down again as simply as possible, much of the so-called climate journalism, and I know you'll be shocked to hear this, here is a climate journalist admitting in a very left-wing publication that much of the so-called journalism that you've seen dominate online spaces and print spaces when it comes to so-called climate change, global warming, it was all based on imagination of maybe a theory, a model of how bad things could get theoretically. Not actual forecasting, not actual modeling. I know that's a huge surprise for you. And again, kind of backs my theory, once again, that in the age of AI, in the age of building all of these data centers that Silicon Valley moguls want to build, all of a sudden we're forgetting about climate change. It's starting to exit stage left or right, whichever one it is, for the second time this morning. That brings me to this. The co-founder of Anthropic, maybe you've heard of the AI model Claude. The co-founder of Anthropic visited the Vatican yesterday. His name is Chris Olah. And he had this to say, and a number of other things to say, about his work with generative AI in general, and how it's disturbing him in some ways. Listen to this.
This call for discernment is profoundly timely. I wish to name 3 questions where I think the church's voice is especially needed. The first is our duty to the global poor. There is a real possibility that AI will displace human labor at a very large scale. If that happens, supporting those displaced will be a moral imperative of historic proportions. This task will be difficult enough, but I worry most dialogue misses an even harder challenge. AI development is concentrated in a handful of wealthy nations. How will we ensure that the gains of AI are shared globally? We do not have a mechanism for this. It is an unsolved problem. And it is the kind of problem the church has historically refused to let the world ignore. The second is the need for moral imagination and ambition regarding human flourishing. If AI models are going to be widespread, what does it look like for humans, families, and the world to flourish? Today, parents are already worried about their children's minds, individuals about the future of their work. These are not questions a lab can answer, but they are questions traditions like yours have carried for millennia. And we need you to keep carrying them into this new moment in history. The third is the need for discernment on the nature of AI models. I am a scientist. I lead a research team that studies the internal structure of these models. What is actually happening inside them? And I will be honest, we keep finding things that are mysterious, even unsettling. We find structures that mirror results from human neuroscience. We find evidence of introspection. We find internal states that functionally mirror joy, satisfaction, fear, grief, and unease. I don't know what that means, but I think it warrants ongoing discernment.
That is the voice of Chris Olah, co-founder of Anthropic. That is the company behind the AI Claude. Pope Leo at the Vatican. Those comments came at the Vatican. Pope Leo said the church and Anthropic will work together to find a way for humanity in this time of artificial intelligence. So I told you I'm coming out of the closet a little bit on the topic of AI. I want to tell you a story. Once upon a time, a new machine appeared at the edge of a worksite. It was loud, strange, frightened people. Not because it was wicked, but because it was powerful. What a team of 20 men could accomplish in 2 grueling weeks of labor, this machine could do in a day or 2. Naturally, people worried. Would the men be sent home? Would the machine be turned against them? And for a time, those fears were not entirely unfounded. There was that terrible episode, of course, in Colorado. One man, consumed by grievance, climbed into one of these machines, turned it on his town, block by block, destroying everything. But here's what history actually recorded. That was one man on one bad day in Colorado. I'm sure these machines have been used for destructive purposes, but that's not the main way that we think about them. In the years that followed, those machines broke ground for hospitals and schools. They cleared the rubble after floods and earthquakes. They carved the roads that connected isolated towns to the rest of the world. The industry didn't collapse. The men who were using manual tools became the operators of those machines. The work changed. The workforce endured. Of course, I'm talking about a bulldozer, earth-moving equipment. The bulldozer itself did not have an opinion about any of the ways that it was used. The killdozer in Colorado, you've heard of that story. It was used for destructive ends. The bulldozer did not care that it put 20 men out of work for 2 weeks, a month, because it could do what they could do in a month, in a day. The bulldozer didn't care. We wouldn't call the bulldozer evil because of what happened in Colorado. We wouldn't call the bulldozer evil because maybe every now and then it's used for destructive ends. We'd be foolish to call it good simply because it built a bunch of hospitals. We would just simply call it a powerful tool. And we'd have to recognize the weight, and we'd have to weigh the pros and cons. And that's something that rests entirely with us. And I think you hear that from Christopher Olah, the co-founder of Anthropic. Good AI. And I'm talking about the stuff that you can use to build things. Build things that are helpful to you. That's kind of like earth-moving equipment, bulldozer. It has the capacity to help you a lot, to do a lot of things a lot more efficiently. It also has the capacity to do a lot of destruction. Destruction of jobs. Destruction of livelihoods. You also heard Christopher Olah invoke that as well. But this is not a question about what does the machine want. This is not a question. The bulldozer didn't want to do any of that. It was just a bulldozer. It was just a tool. AI, I'm still convinced, despite Olah's insinuation there that under the hood, AI can think and process, emote like humans do. No. It's just a tool. A powerful tool. So I'm dipping my toe. I'm still very skeptical about this age in which we live. But I'm just telling you personally, I am doing things right now that I would have never imagined doing even a year ago. 2 specific examples. In my day job, I have used Claude to build software programs to me that cuts down on the amount of time after I'm done processing the day's show, that cuts down on the amount of time that it takes me to do that by 2 hours. 2 hours. Every single day. 2 hours. I wouldn't have been able to do that a year ago. But AI helped me figure out a way to do that. That's 2 hours that I could be building other things, doing other things, refining other things. 2 hours I could be spending with my family every single day. compounded over weeks, months, years. So that's one example. The other example is that late last week, I pressed submit on the App Store, on the Apple App Store. For months now, the last 3 months, I've been developing an application for my wife's business that we've been trying to, we haven't launched it officially yet, but my wife has written 6 ebooks, 1,000 pages, from her experience as a labor and delivery nurse to moms from a mom, about, what are kind of some of the things as an L&D nurse that she wishes more women knew, from the time you get that first positive pregnancy test to the first 10 weeks that you're at home. So she wrote a series of books. And I thought, how do we market those books? How do we get those books out there? And I thought, why don't we try to build an app, a mobile app? I'm not going to tell you that I typed in a prompt to Claude and I said, hey, Claude, my wife wrote 6 books, create an app, don't make any mistakes. Nope. This app has been through 82 different builds. I had to educate myself along the way about how programming works, how the backends and dependencies work for app building. It took a lot of persistence, a lot of determination on my part. But now it's under review by Apple on the App Store. A powerful app, one of its kind, has all of the tools that new moms and moms-to-be could ever want all in one place. Oh, and they also happen to be funneling them to my wife's books for purchase. Things I could have never imagined doing 1 year ago, 2 years ago, they allow me to accomplish. Is AI going to be used and is already being used for very destructive purposes, very destructive ends? Yes. Yes, it is. And that's not going to stop. I'm well aware as well. I've said as much. I really, really detest the way that AI is talked about in terms of displacing jobs, displacing workers, as if those people are just numbers on a page, widgets. They're not. The capacity that AI has to displace a lot of jobs, white-collar jobs, really scary to think about, especially when the white-collar workforce makes up as much of our consumer economy as it does. Those things are not lost on me. But my perspective is this. If you do not know how to program, if you don't know how to do design really well, if you are not a software engineer, but you have grit, determination, and you're a go-getter, if you have persistence, if you are somebody who is highly driven, as I already said, I think, if you're already a high-functioning person, but you don't have some of these skills that AI models like Claude bring to the table, this is going to change your world. It will. Now, whether that changes everybody's world, does everybody have the capacity, the drive, the go-getterness to use these tools well, to build good things? No. But for the ones who do, and I'm one of those people, not to toot my own horn, it's incredible what you can accomplish and do. So that's me dipping my toe out of the closet when it comes to AI. Is it a broad endorsement of all AI? Nope. Is it a broad denouncement of all AI? No, it's just a tool. We just have to learn how to use it well. That's going to do it for Tuesday. You have a wonderful day. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.